Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to the NorthStar Café. My name is Meenakshi Iyer. I'm your host and the founder and principal of NorthStar Solutions and Services, which is a boutique future of work-oriented coaching, training, and consulting practice. I'm physically located in Virginia in the US on the East Coast. And I've been away for a few weeks. So it's lovely to be back here at the NorthStar Cafe, again, having these conversations that are focused around leadership development, particularly at the intersection of people, process, and technology. And as always, I have a set of wonderful guests today to chat with. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear from you where you're joining us from. So do pop that in the chat. We are at the moment live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. So you can catch us at any of these channels. And typically what we do here is have meaningful, impactful conversations around what leadership means, especially in the changing world of work. And we all have heard the term future of work being thrown around quite a bit. So we do talk about that. So I meet with guests from around the world who have their own specific niche, and it all surrounds people development, if you will, talent development, and particularly at the intersection of people, process, and technology. More than ever, as our ways of working and ways of being are driven by technology, what is it? What does the world of work look like, and what can we anticipate in the future? So that's most of our conversations. Love to hear from you where you're joining us from. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you to everyone that will watch the recording as well. So having said that, today's focus is on DEIB at work, and we're talking with the co-founders of DesiNation, and I'm going to bring them on in just a minute. The whole concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, I don't know about you, I find, especially living in the US, I find that this space is crowded. There's a lot of good work being done, but at the same time, a lot needs to be done yet. And it's a bit of an alphabet soup, yeah? D and I, DEI, then there's DEIB, DEIJ. What is all this? And what does it mean for us as part of the world of work, as part of future of work? What does it look like? And to unpack all that today, we have with us the co-founders of DesiNation, Sudha, Krishnan, and Krishnan. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Meenakshi.
Hello. And I can't believe it was just a few weeks ago that we were all in person together in Hyderabad. It feels, as I was saying earlier in the green room, it feels so surreal to be back behind Zoom screens, but here we are.
Yes. Yes. So truly a digital experience, from physical to digital now.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Sudha.
No, I was just saying, we spoke on the subject so much physically, we just decided to go live today.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah, we also need some audience.
Yes, absolutely. Sudha and I first met through the coaching community at Cocharia about a little over 3 years ago now. And it was not until about 2 months ago that we actually met in person for the first time. But we've done some amazing collaborative work. Sudha has a multidimensional corporate career, and then currently she wears many hats, and currently one of the hats she wears is that of a coach. Sudha is an ICF certified systemic team coach and a relationship coach. She serves her clients globally through the many digital platforms that she's a part of. She's been an entrepreneur, and Sudha and Krishnan together have been social entrepreneurs. And we are going to dig into that a little bit as well. So I met Krishnan through Sudha, obviously, and we've had some amazing conversations around this whole world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging, and what does diversity really mean, the different dimensions of it. So Krishnan also has had a multidimensional corporate career, and has been an entrepreneur for more than a decade now. And I think you two are serial entrepreneurs, right? So the DesiNation is your second venture together, yeah? So so I would love to hear a little bit more about yourselves in your own words, and then we'll dig into the conversation today. So I'd love to start off with Krishnan. So if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and what got you to DesiNation.
I think it was a twist with destiny, so to say. I don't want to sound very philosophical or dramatic, but I think truly it happened in my life. My encounters with diversity, equity, social inclusion, it all happened in the United States when I actually was coming back from the city of Atlanta after I actually finished an accidental encounter with Dialogue in the Dark. So that was my first social entrepreneurship journey, which started off way back in 2010 when I experienced Dialogue in the Dark in the city of Atlanta in the Georgium Science Museum. Not knowing what to do for almost about 4 or 5 hours when I was actually coming back to India, I wanted to go and kill time. So I went into this very unique exhibit called Dialogue in the Dark, which I've not even heard of. I didn't know what it was. All I came to know was it is a darkness themed exhibition and a restaurant. And I was very, very intrigued. And I was all alone. So I thought maybe I will have a date with darkness, a date in darkness. And I actually plunged into darkness, and that completely transformed my life, so to say, and I decided to come back and start Dialogue in the Dark in India. And in 2011, we started Dialogue in the Dark along with Sudha. The journey was so very different, interesting, intriguing, and also gave me multifaceted exposure into the world of diversity, equity, social inclusion. These terms also I didn't know at that point of time in my life. All I was doing and all I knew was raising funds as an investment manager for large infrastructure projects. I was part of the healthcare system. I was leading a medical school. I was also into an infrastructure project, and these projects took me to the US. And so I didn't really understand the terms diversity, equity, social inclusion, belonging, justice, and all of that. And Dialogue in the Dark totally changed it, because in the format of Dialogue in the Dark, though they don't reveal upfront, you actually encounter a person with visual impairment at the end of the show. So after you come out of the Dialogue in the Dark, you actually see that the person was actually taking care of you in complete darkness, whether they were a dining guide or they were a tour guide. And what you do for 1 hour in Dialogue in the Dark is to experience real life situations, like what it is to go and have a walk in a park, or what it is to go and cross a shaking bridge, what is to go and play a game of cricket in complete darkness, where probably fixing the bat and the ball itself is such a humongous challenge. And we could see that. I think recently we came out of the IPL a couple of days back in India. So we know how difficult it is to actually go and hit a 4 or a 6 at the end of the match. And in Dialogue in the Dark, people try to do that from the start of the match. It's so difficult. It is so different. And it's extremely adrenaline pumping and exciting, entertaining. And people actually forget that you're actually in a zone of darkness for about 1 hour. People get acclimatized to so much of darkness, and you also forget that the person who's actually guiding you, you don't know who is she or he. And when you come out, that is when you actually see that this person is a visually impaired or a blind person. To me personally, what happened is I was awestruck. I was completely inspired because I've never had an encounter with anybody who had a disability in my personal space, social space, or my workspace. I still remember I was touching 40 years of age when I actually experienced Dialogue in the Dark in the city of Atlanta. Those 40 years, I've gone to the best schools, I've gone to the best college, I've gone to the best corporate employers for work, but I've never encountered people with disability in any of these spaces. So for me, this was very, very path-breaking as a personal experience for me. So that's where my journey of diversity, equity, social inclusion started. Maybe more I would talk as we move forward in the conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love what you said, the personal experience that you had. And the other thing that you shared that was very insightful is up until 40 or so years old, you hadn't had that experience of meeting someone with disability. And I also realized as you were sharing your experience that the perspective of diversity and inclusion that you have, it really comes from that space as well, that dimension of physical abilities or the lack of it. And I don't know about you or others that are in the audience, but most of the time, especially in the US context, when I hear the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion, more often than not, I'm thinking about other physical characteristics such as race or skin color or ethnicity and things like that. So just at the outset, to hear your perspective, your introduction into this space from the dimension of physical ability or disability, that itself is very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Over to you, Sudha. How about you?
I think my introduction to the whole DEIJP space also started with Dialogue in the Dark. Very similar story. I think when Krishnan experienced this, I still remember when he called me back from US, so excited after going through this experience. It was night, in the middle of the night sometime here, and then we kept talking about it for almost more than an hour, and I could really see how excited he was. And the one question we kept asking each other is, we see when we researched, and at that point in time, I used to find a figure of almost, 15 million people who are people with disabilities. And then me and Krishnan used to ask, where are these people? Where are we seeing them? And the hard fact that hit us was, except for probably at the traffic lights, when we see people with disabilities, probably who are just begging, I don't remember to have seen them anywhere. As Krishnan said, either in our schools or colleges or in our office spaces. So we were wondering, what's this all about? And Krishnan was super thrilled to tell me that, how he actually experienced this visually impaired person who was a guide for him, a tour guide, and how capable he was and how confident he was. And he was so mobile and independent. And Krishnan was saying, I really would like to understand what is this space all about in India. And that's when our curiosities, actually start helped us to take one step forward at a time. And then we started understanding more and more on space. And today, as you very rightly said, Meenakshi, we are into our second social entrepreneurship journey through DesiNation. It just, the journey kept going, and it's almost now 13 years we are pursuing this in different avatars, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And as you were speaking, Sudha, I also paid attention to the background, and I noticed the icons that you have as part for your logo. So that's a great segue into the next question that I have is what is DesiNation, and like what is the name, the genesis? If you would both share that.
Krishnan, you want to share?
Yeah, I think the whole idea, we did almost over 10 years of work in the disability space, Meenakshi, through Dialogue in the Dark, and we were able to create a humongous impact in terms of actually sensitizing Indians about the abilities of people with disability. And actually, we wanted to look at expanding our scope to include other forms of diverse identity groups. And COVID came in, and we were compelled, I would say. We were very, very popular. And we were actually having a lot of people coming into Dialogue in the Dark across our centers in India. We had almost about 5 Dialogue in the Dark centers across the country. And people were coming in, actually enjoying the experience in the dark, taking back a message on disability diversity. But post-COVID, we had to also look at how we could transform ourselves digitally because the world was moving digital. So we looked at from being physical to digital, and that's when we started DesiNation. As the name says, the whole approach of DesiNation is to create a nation in India which is very appreciative of diversity, equity, and social inclusion. And we always believe that if inclusion has to be a very natural, organic outcome, it is ideal that people understand, appreciate diversity very naturally. And in our own case, we found that in the absence of encounters with people from diverse identity groups, it is very difficult to appreciate or do inclusion naturally. So how do we do it is when we said if you need to do inclusion, then we need to look at diversity appreciation. So diversity education for social inclusion, or diversity, equity, social inclusion. So we said this DESI can be interchangeably used for diversity education, diversity exchange, diversity employment, diversity empowerment. For what? For social inclusion. So the second part of the logo is all about social inclusion, which is an outcome, and DE is an input or the work that we do actually. And what is the ultimate? Whom do you want to address? Nation, starting with India. And the whole vision of DesiNation is to go across all nations who are very, very keen to appreciate diversity with a view to do inclusion.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, and so it looks like the DESI is actually, I mean, it's an acronym, and as you share, it covers many different connotations. And I think I shared this with both of you when we met in person, is that when I first saw this, for me, DESI is Indian, right? And especially in the US, anybody from India, the Indian diaspora refers to one another as DESIs. Yeah. And so to me, when I saw DesiNation, to me, the focus on India came through very clearly. And I think for me, that's more to do with my own perspective as an Indian immigrant living in the US. But it also, I remember that moment very clearly when the three of us were having these conversations, when I felt there a lot of pride in the fact that here's this edtech company, DesiNation, that's taking this India-centric view on this whole big topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, the whole alphabet soup. And I think that part was very important to me because I don't think there's any other company that I've heard of that's doing this kind of specific work, and that too focusing on diversity from a physical ability standpoint as well. So those two things really stood out for me, and it's absolutely fantastic to hear from you, the founders, of what your vision has been to, in setting up DesiNation. So thank you so much for sharing that. How about you, Sudha? What's your perspective? Also, I'm very curious to hear from you, Sudha, as a coach. Does that help you bring a different dimension to this? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And today we are talking about psychological safety as something very, very important. If a team will have to be functioning at its best, or if all the team members will have to be operating out of their best potential. And to me, this is very, very connected, right? And unless and until somebody is going to feel absolutely belonged, what I mean by belonged is, can we create spaces for people to be who they are? And that is when somebody is going to feel absolutely comfortable to express, to freely innovate, to probably seek help, to probably even, express when there is probably even moments of feeling very overwhelmed, helpless, and all of those things. So to me, I think the more and more an organization is going to work and understand the importance of all the letters, like how you put it, Meenakshi, the soup of letters, DEIJB, right? And people ask me, how is this going to really impact business? How is it really going to have an impact? To me, the primary benefit that one could look at is creating psychological safe spaces.
And also the other piece I do want to go back to, I can't remember which one of you said, bringing that awareness and that education around that as well, right? So in terms of psychological safety, again, most of the conversations happen, they don't seem to include physical ability in general, those conversations within corporate settings. And so can you talk to us more about, particularly in the Indian context, what is the urgency around this, around increasing awareness and acceptance of people with disabilities?
I think the data speaks for itself. If you look at the government census, or you look at the World Bank data, you look at the WHO or United Nations, any of these large forums who actually have access data, India has the largest population of people living with disabilities. The official number, as per 2011, it's almost about 12, 13 years back, census talks about 26.8 million people. And after that, we had the expansion of the ambit of disabilities from 7 to 21. So if you had 7 disabilities recognized by India in 2011, and we had a population of 26.8 million, just an extrapolation, people are saying that that number could be as high as maybe 200 million, maybe, we don't know. The numbers are still not out. But I think World Bank and popular research organizations estimate the number to be really, really a huge number. On top of it, if you add other forms of identities, diverse identities, which can include the LGBTQ, government statistics 2011 talks about 45 million people who actually are from a diverse identity groups. Then you have women. Almost about 590 million women are there in India, which is quite a big number. And the World Bank estimates only 17% GDP contributions coming from these 590 women in India. So there's huge disparity when it comes to numbers. And I've always found in our own 10, 12 years of active experience in dealing with disability, is if you don't know really what you're dealing with, you can really not come out with a solution. If I don't know what I'm dealing with, how will I deal with it? So I think diversity, inclusion is all about, I don't know what I'm dealing with, so therefore the best is to avoid it. So that's been the approach taken with respect to disability, with respect to LGBTQ, with respect to age and generations, with respect to socioeconomic inequality, the linguistic divide that we have in terms of the comfort. So the mainstream society is not really, I will not say is indifferent or is not comfortable. They don't know how to deal with what they're dealing with. So that is why we said that fundamental problem is actually bringing about that key skill. I'm not even using loose words like we need to sensitize people, we need to build awareness with people. I think it's a core skill, it's a fundamental skill every human should possess on how do I appreciate diversity so that I'm able to include a wide variety of people in my personal, professional, social spaces. So I think to answer your question, I think the statistics is very much in favor of really the need of the hour. I really liked the starting words that you said that in US you see very crowded, it's already crowded space. India is a crowded country, but very little work has been happening currently. So we are the opposite of you. The opposite of US. So of course a lot of good work is happening, but I have seen in my experience that they're all siloed. A lot of good work is happening around disability, a lot of credible work is happening around gender. You have more girl children going to school. So a lot of work is really happening in the NGO sector, in the CSR space and all of that in India. But given the magnitude of the issue that we are, I think it's going to be extremely, I would say is not surmountable for just a few organizations. So I think it's a huge space and it's a very urgent need that we need to look at.
Such great call outs there, Krishnan. Thank you. And the other piece is it's also the amount of work that needs to be done in not really just building awareness. Like you said, it's also about not knowing. A lot of times people don't want to engage with people with disabilities, as an example, is because they don't know what to do or they don't know how to interact or engage with folks like that. And there's also this sense of just because, who defines what's normal? That's also, I remember one of the things we talked about earlier is if it's not normal, then we don't know what to do. But who's got the authority to define what's normal, right? And when a lot of times statistics, go ahead, Sudha.
No, when you said that, what crafted my mind, Meenakshi, I think just because there's a majority of people, we think that is normal. Right? It's like probably we are used to seeing certain kind of people in our workplace, certain kind of people in with whom we go to schools. We think this is normal. As you very rightly said, who defines normal?
True. And
And many times, even when me and Krishnan we used to talk, in fact, the word inclusion is also, it's like, who are we to include?
Yeah.
Right? I don't think it's an act that needs to be done. It needs to be felt.
That's profound.
Yeah. Today, I see a lot of people saying, we need to, and in fact, there's this a very famous phrase, right? And where they say diversity is about being invited to the party, and inclusion is about being invited to dance.
Yeah.
While it is metaphorically, it helps us to really understand the concept, but it makes me also question that, right?
Yes.
I don't think one need to be invited. Like once you're invited, you need to be feeling belong. You need to be feeling part of it.
Absolutely. And spoken
The,
like a true coach.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You bring up so many points here, Sudha. I've always believed that diversity is a fact and inclusion is a choice that each of us makes, and it's an intentional choice, right? And so that is one of my sort of pet peeves around a lot of DEI strategies that see implemented within companies, corporate settings, where there's focus on, oh, we need to ensure that there's diversity in our hiring practices. And to me, it's like, okay, all that's great, but then once you have a diverse population within your organization, how are you setting everyone up for success? If then the expectation is that everybody needs to follow a norm, which is more often than not Eurocentric and leaning towards the white male demographic, at least in the American context, then what are we really doing? Right. So I totally appreciate the point that you made, is that we don't have to do anything extra to include. People need to feel included. And that's the other thing. It's like, if you feel like you belong, and then you won't wait for anybody to invite you to dance. You would be on the dance floor, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other thing also that came up for me is that there's a subtle difference, and again, it's experienced by the individual. Of you may have been included, but are you really welcome? And that's where it steps into feeling that sense of belonging, right? So I know I've been in spaces where I've been included, but I know that I'm just being tolerated. I'm not really been welcome, right? So that's a great distinction that to draw as well. So I wanted to ask you, you really, DesiNation as a company really exists at this intersection of technology and people, and it is a social entrepreneurship venture. Can you talk to us more about how you arrived at this mode of delivery of whatever it is that you wanted to do? Why did you choose digital, and what is the impact of technology in the work that you're doing? And I'd like to start with Sudha, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think we say, adversity is the mother of innovation, right? So I think when me and Krishnan were only thinking of dialogue in the dark, I think we were super focused on the space of disability when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And it so happened with the pandemic because we were a physical experience. And like any other organization, we also had this challenge of now, how do we make ourselves relevant in today's world, especially the post pandemic world? Like how people have started moving to work hybrid. We also thought we need to also, probably be in both physical and the digital space. But how do we do what we are doing at Dialogue at the Dark? In fact, this whole challenge of pandemic also brought with it a huge opportunity of how do we expand our scope beyond disability? How do we include the other forms of diversity as well? And how do we start working on that space? So today in DesiNation, we are talking about not just about disability, we are talking about gender bias, we are talking about ageism, and we are working on many other topics which would include the entire DEIJ space.
And And I love the point you raised about how you learned from your Dialogue in the Dark experience, what you kept from that, and what you learned, what you to pivot it on. So moving from being totally only physical to being in the digital space, and then what you kept from that is the continued focus on physical abilities or lack of it, and then you still expanded your scope to other things as well. What kind of reception have you had? I understand you're primarily focused in the corporate setting in India. Is that right?
Yes. Just to add on to what Sudha was sharing earlier, we truly have become a digital experience or digital learning experience organization today. And when I say that with conviction because when we are completely engrossed in the dialogue that our physical form of empathy education. We had a lot of corporations coming back, a lot of schools coming back, educators coming back and saying that how do we really scale this to impact? Because you have physical dialogue centers across the country. Maybe you can have 5 today. You can go to 5, can go to 10, 20, 50, 100 maybe. But there's always a scope, there's always a limitation in terms of the number of people you can actually sensitize through dialogue physical encounters. And we were actually having this as a feedback from our clientele. And we were not able to really work on this till the pandemic actually stuck. And we were actually in the middle of, as Sudha said, the adversity actually threw on our face an opportunity to also transform ourselves digitally. And today, as we both speak to you in 2023, we have come back in as not just digital, but also we have come back to creating temporary dialogue across the country. In fact, we have become a physical and a digital learning organization. So that's why we use the word phygital, which is something that we have heard in the financial markets or we have heard in the digital literacy programs. We're also bringing to what I call not just edtech. We are not an edtech company, but we are a human tech company is what we actually wanting to call ourselves. Because as you rightly said, we are at the intersection of people, process, and technology. We use processes and delivery mechanisms to actually reach out to more and more diverse identity groups of people. And technology is a great accelerator for that. So we've kind of organized ourselves into a micro learning site where we actually are creating a lot of scenario-based micro video lessons on all forms of diversity and inclusion subjects. While for the leadership level at a very senior leadership or manager levels, we're also giving enterprise-wide sensitization through dialogue in the dark, which is physical.
That's really fascinating, and I love the pivots that you've made and how you've transformed yourselves. The pandemic being a major cause for the pivot, and so. I also remember you talking about the videos when you had met in person as well. So what's the best way for someone that's, let's say, watching right now or will watch the replay? What's the best way for them to go take a look at the work that you're doing?
So currently we have two forms or we have two ways of actually reaching out to our clientele. One is you log on to our learning site and you access our programs by becoming a member. You subscribe to our platform and you become a member and you can have unlimited access to all the lessons which are posted out there. We keep adding a lesson a day types. As we speak to you, we are in the process of creating maybe nearly 50 to 60 micro video lessons on different forms of diversity inclusion subjects. And we hope to add at least a few more in the days to come and want to reach a dream figure of a few hundred micro video lessons on all forms of diversity inclusion subjects. The idea is to be a mini Google for diversity, equity, social inclusion subjects. At least it is very country specific, so we are looking at India to start with.
Yeah,
and we also have all forms of language layering and stuff like that, which is a layering of technology that we do in terms of voiceovers and language layerings. That's one way that you could reach out to the DesiNation content. The other way is that we have a lot of B2B corporate clientele who like the work we do, and they said probably we'd like to take it inside our learning management system. So we give them a compatible repository of learning resources to them.
Okay, and what kind of response have you had so far?
I think if I have to sum it up in one word, it's amazing because it was not. It was not a. How would I say this? It's more of a push. It's like everybody said it's good to go and exercise your muscles, but none of us did it. At least I didn't do it. Till somebody like a very very popular brand back in India pushed healthcare into your phone and said that if you do this, like the walkathon or stepathons that came into people's mobile phones, what we are currently doing is people are saying, yeah, this is good to do, but should I do it? And when we actually started to go back and show them certain scenario-based micro video learning lessons, that everybody could relate to these scenarios. They said, oh my God, this is exactly the scene that happened in my office yesterday. Well, I didn't know that this is the kind of diversity, equity, social inclusion kind of topics you're talking about. We thought you were going to talk about what is diversity, what is equity, what is social inclusion, what is various forms of disabilities, what are the various technical terms that we use in the LGBTQ community. We said we are doing anyway all those things, but that's not the point. The point is, how do we make it very relatable to the average Indian on the street so that he is able to really see these lessons and say, oh, this is something that probably I am not aware of, but this is something even I do. So therefore, let me start suspending my bias-based judgments and go into the room and actually start becoming a very open person, so that there is hope for inclusion, there's hope for appreciating diversity. So this is the kind of response we're getting, fascinating response from corporates with whom we've signed up. Long way to go with the education department. The school education department is loving this. We are at very early stages of talks with certain governments, but they're saying this is something that we should contemplate to actually make it as part of a curriculum in schools. Because India has launched the National Education Program 2020, which talks about inclusion, Vasudeva Kutumbam and all of that. So how do you do it? If people don't know how to appreciate Vasudeva Kutumbam, how do you become a Vasudeva Kutumbam? You know? So I think that's the whole journey. Sudha?
Yeah, in fact, when you were saying Vasudeva Kutumbam Krishnan, people don't even know who all belong in this Kutumbam, right? That is the whole exclusion we are talking about here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, go ahead, Krishnan.
Well, that's been the response. Corporates are really liking it after they saw it. I think Sudha and me are going through the same or a similar experience, I would say. Till we were able to bring people to the footsteps of the Dialogue in the Dark, people said, what is Dialogue in the Dark? Is it an entertainment? Is it an exhibition? Is it about disability? Is it for profit? Is it a charity? Is it sympathy experience? Is it about blindness? And when people actually walked and stepped in and took that journey of 1 hour into the dark, we had to stop talking. We just didn't have to do anything. They started taking a lot of action at their own respective workspaces, whether it's the government or it is the corporates, which actually translated to almost about 10,000 job pledges Dialogue Dark was able to create in its 10 years of existence. The same, with a similar experience, we are experiencing it in DesiNation. Till we still actually created those few videos and went back to those corporates, we went back to those government stakeholders, we went back to those educators, we went back to those DEI professionals. They said, this is interesting. I think this is very refreshing. This is something that we never experienced. And we had a few top-notch leaders from global corporations who said, this is something we have seen in our part of the world. It could be some corporations from Canada or from US or from Australia or from UK. But then for them, when they talk about, let's say, racial diversity, it's more about Black Lives Matters, for example. And they were kind of, for a lack of any other interesting content, they were also sending those content to the Indian subcontinent, where they had their employees who are sitting in their offices or working from home from a strange tier 2, tier 3 village. And we actually had this conversation with one of the executives who's working for a top-notch Fortune 500 company in India. So when he actually was watching the Black Lives Matters video, he was saying, this is amazing content, fantastic, but I'm not able to relate to this. For me, probably in India, rural life matters, or Dalit life matters, or a person who's actually speaking Bhojpuri also should be included. That matters, you know? So these are the connects we made in our drawing board research time. And we said probably India, with so much of diversity already there, and people are actually struggling to come to terms with appreciating diversity, is a time for us to look at India-centric content and create those Indian faces that Krishnan and Krishnan-like people can relate to it.
Well said. Go ahead, Sudha.
No, I'm sure being a woman, you would relate to this, Meenakshi. See, there are a lot of gender related bias that we do go through in our corporate lives. But it has been, what do I say? We've been so blind to it because we thought that was normalcy. Till the
Hmm.
time when we started working on those scenarios, as Krishnan said, people who watched this, they said, "Oh my God, this is such an important thing that we all need to acknowledge for." But we have just been behaving as if this is normalcy.
Hmm. Between the two of you, the all the nuggets that you've shared, um, it's hard for me to keep up. First of all, congratulations on the 10,000 jobs in 10 years through Dialogue in the Dark. I think that's phenomenal. And uh, as I hear both of you share, what's evident to me is you already have a model, proof of concept that has um, been so successful with what you've done with Dialogue in the Dark, and the work that you've done in bringing awareness to a part of the society that's so often completely ignored in several parts of the country in India. And with DesiNation, bringing back the focus on diversity uh, from an Indian context. And I think that's so important, especially given that in urban areas, a lot of us that are working full time, we more often than not we work for corporations that are based in the Western world, be it in parts of Europe or in North America. And I have often wondered, and I don't have any direct exposure to that. I've often wondered, what do global DEI strategies look like for these companies, where most of the workforce lives outside of their headquarter, where they're headquartered, right? So the cultural context, the context around language, all of that is so different, and diversity looks different. And I have that personal lived experience of when I'm in India, the different intersections in my identity, they are different and they stack up differently, right? So
Right.
the caste and my gender and my surname and these things and the languages I speak or don't speak, those become important. Whereas in the US, my skin color and my immigration status, and then my gender, right? So they stack up differently. And
Right.
so what can be uh, the same layer in identity can put me in a position of privilege in one part, can put me in a position of disadvantage in another part of the world, right? And so someone like you two, and having created this platform called DesiNation, I think it's high time that somebody did that that focused on India, given the population that we have, and also the impact that we create in the global talent space. I think it's high time that people took the time, people outside of India, companies outside of India, took the time to understand what the landscape of diversity looks like in India, and
Right.
and really look at what does intersectionality really mean in the Indian context. Um, so as we begin to wrap up the conversation today, I want to hear from you. What is your vision? You've alluded to some of that. What is your vision for DesiNation as a company, and also with the mission that you're driving towards?
I think it may sound very dramatic, but I think we truly want to make India a Desi nation.
That's a good
So
one.
India is known as Desi all over the world, but we truly want to make India a Desi nation, a nation that appreciates. When I say the nation, I think at various levels, there is a lot of appreciation for diversity, equity, social inclusion. Whether it is the corporate leadership or the business leaderships, political leadership, a lot of commitment is there towards really making India inclusive country or inclusive nation. We see the disconnect is in the middle of the pyramid and bottom of the pyramid, largely due to inaccessibility to basic understanding of diversity or appreciation for diversity, social inclusion or social exclusion issues. So I think we are still, as a country, getting towards accomplishing the basic SDG goals. So gender inequality, for example, or reduce inequalities. How do you make everything accessible to people from all forms of diverse identity groups? So these are some of the issues India is grappling with, and we are still not able to fathom the solutions around it. So DesiNation is going to play a very significant, though maybe a small or medium or large, we still don't know. Only time will unfold the dimension of our intervention. But I think the whole idea, the vision, the ambition, the mission is to create a country which truly appreciates diversity and social inclusion of people who are otherwise marginalized or excluded. So the equation is from various data points, we understand that India with a 1.4 billion population, people who are excluded through various data sources, we understand is nearly about 500 million people, which includes people with disabilities, gender or women, people with diverse gender and sexual orientation identities. Ageism, India is also slowly going to catch up from 2040 in terms of maturing elderly age populations. So all this we put together, socioeconomic inequality, rural-urban divide, all this put together will be almost nearly about 500 to 550 million people in India who technically don't access education, health, skills, employment the way I do, for example. So how do we bridge this gap is only by making the other side, which is the 900 million people have to appreciate the need to include these 500 million people. So if I have to give it an equation, I think 900 is equal to 500 or 500 is equal to 900. So how do we bring these 50 crore people or 500 million people into mainstream society is the vision of DesiNation. As I speak to you, I'm not really sure if this is something that's going to happen in my lifetime, but that's my goal because I'm hoping that I will live long to do this.
That was fantastic, and I loved how you said, the 500 million people is a significant percentage of the population, and the rest of us, we need to understand what the lives of these 500 million people look like, and what is it that develop that empathy to be able to support them in accessing everything that we access without even thinking twice about it, right? So that's fabulous. Thank you for that. Sudha?
Yeah. No, adding on to what Krishnan said, right? When he said we want to make India a Desi nation. And somewhere I strongly believe this, Meenakshi. Today we hear these words, DEI, DEIJB, all of these in the corporates. But I don't think it's only the responsibility of the corporates to create an inclusive world or an inclusive nation here. I think how can each and every one of us understand the space more and do our bit to create the momentum that it needs. In fact, I don't know, I think it was the UN president or somebody who during on the Women's Day, he made a statement that it's going to take another 300 years for us to meet our target on inclusion or gender equity. We are so behind. So I don't think it's just on the responsibility of corporates to do this. How can we, every individual, take this upon us? And I think primarily what is important for each and every individual to take this upon them is first they need to be aware. We need to first recognize the problem to even bring a change about it. So how do we make this recognition possible? How can we help people recognize this and own this up so that they can do their bit?
Profound as always. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I'm also on aside topic. We are also very happy to say that Sudha also, we have two CEOs in the company. One is me, and I've been designated from more of a business standpoint as a chief executive officer, and Sudha also is a CEO, and she is designated as a chief empathy officer. So we are now kind of now trying to make this. Every organization should have a CEO who's a chief empathy officer. If you really want to be building appreciation for diversity and social inclusion to happen as a natural outcome, people have to fundamentally become empathetic in life to the world around them. And who better than Sudha, who's a coach and an empathy I don't know, human at the heart is required here. I'm not saying because we go back a spouse at home. I truly believe that she's a great empathetic human being, and that is the most important fundamental core for diversity, equity, social inclusion to really happen.
Absolutely. And so well said. And it's been such a joy to know the two of you and also to chat with you both today about the amazing work that you're doing. And I just realized that you've made such a meaningful addition to the alphabet soup, DESI, which is diversity, equity, and social inclusion. And I think that that is expansive and comprehensive, and it speaks to so many social groups that are underserved and underrepresented. So the work that you're doing, and with a focus on India, something that's from India, catering to the Indian audience, that is absolutely amazing. And I know I've said this before. I can't stop saying this. This is absolutely fantastic, and I really wish you the best and a lot of success in what you're doing and in your mission. And once again, thank you so much, both of you, for chatting with me today at the NorthStar Café. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and also staying connected around DesiNation. So once again, thank you both, Krishnan and Sudha, for your time today and for sharing your passion for the world of inclusion and equity around the world. Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Meenakshi, for this opportunity. Right now, India is getting included in the DEIJ space.
Yes, and thanks to the work that the two of you are doing. Absolutely. Yeah. And once again, I want to thank everyone that watched us live and folks that will watch the recording. You'll find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And I also wanted to put a plug in for our next episode at the NorthStar Café, which will be in 15 days, every other week. We meet every other week on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. New York time. So on June 14th, same time, I'll be chatting with Sally Clark, who is the co-director of the Human Leaders. She's based in the Netherlands, and she's an author, speaker, and she focuses on bringing humanity back in the workplace. She's a burnout recovery expert. She's an author. So looking forward to speaking with Sally, and I hope you'll all join us. So once again, with that, thank you very much for your time today, and take care and be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.